Hey guys, welcome to the weekly question video. If you want to leave us a question, details on how to do that is down below, as well as links to support the channel either through YouTube membership or over on Patreon. So today's question is kind of a complicated one. It's kind of something that I don't know if we're going to be able to delve completely into it. I may have to do an entire podcast on this. But it's how can a taken in hand develop deeper submission? This is really complicated. Like I said, it's something that isn't going to be a one size fits all. It's going to be something that you're going to have to try different techniques and different tips to see really what works for you, because this is going to depend a lot on personality. It's going to depend a lot on your perspective and your relationship and how you interact with your head of household. And so there's a lot of different things that go into developing deeper submission. So with that said, I'm going to give some general tips, but understand that not all of these tips are going to resonate with you. And so you really do need to look at what resonates with you, take what works, leave what doesn't. As always, it's not a one size fits all. You have to make it your own. So the first tip I would say to developing deeper submission is you have to choose that you want to. That may sound kind of silly, because if you are taken in hand, there is an assumption that you want to submit to your head of household. But that's not always the case. Or maybe you want to, but you really haven't gone into yourself and decided that you're going to. There is such a difference between wanting something and deciding to do it. And so you can want to submit, but until you decide to commit to submission, it's going to be really, really hard to make yourself actually do it. So that's the first thing, is decide that you are going to submit. Decide that you are going to do what it takes to submit to your head of household. The second tip is ask your head of household for help. Tell them that you really want to submit on a deeper level, that you've made the decision that you're going to submit on a deeper level, but you really want their help to kind of develop that submission more. Sometimes it's good to ask our head of households for help. It puts them in a position to help us develop who we are as taken in hands. It helps them to feel in control and in charge when we come to them and give them that authority, right? Because until we come under submission, until we make the decision to submit to them, they really don't have the ability to assert their authority the way they need to. And so when you tell them, like, hey, I want to submit and I'm making the decision to submit, it almost gives them kind of confirmation that they can take that authority more and that you are going to submit to it. Understand that sometimes that can come with consequences. And in fact, that would be my third tip, is ask your head of household to impose consequences on you for a lack of submission. Of course, this is going to look different for everybody, but decide what submission means in your relationship. For me, I know that Coda really does value and prioritize my obedience. And so my best way to display submission to Coda is to be obedient to him. And so when we went through this journey ourselves, where I wanted to develop a deeper sense of submission to Coda, I asked for him to hold me accountable to submitting to him. And what that meant for us is that he held me accountable to obeying him. Every head of household is going to have a different priority for their taken in hand, so you definitely need to have that conversation, because whatever they value the most from you is going to be the best way that you can display submission to them. So that, and ask for that accountability. Say, I want to submit to you, so if I'm not submitting to you in the way that you value the most, hold me accountable to that. Impose consequences, impose punishments for my lack of submission. Another way that you can develop a deeper sense of submission is to really think about what it means to submit. Read sources, listen to podcasts, be in community with other people who support what you're trying to accomplish through submission. You really want to surround yourself with a support network that is going to really support your efforts to submit to your head of household and not undermine your efforts to submit to your head of household, which is kind of the second part of this tip here. Is you really want to limit or eliminate influences that undermine your effort to submit to your head of household. You know who it is in your life, because we all have somebody that thinks that submission is just not something that you should do. And so you really want to at least limit the amount of influence that you give that person over what you're doing, because that will undermine your effort to submit to your head of household. So if you want to develop deeper submission, if you want to make the choice to submit to them, you have to not invite voices in that are going to tell you that your efforts are futile or that you shouldn't be doing this. You really want to invite influences and people and voices in that are going to support your efforts. Another thing that you can do to develop deeper submission is to look at actions that make you feel submissive. Is there something that you can do for your head of household that serves only them, that might put you into a more submissive headspace? Could that be making their coffee and giving it to them in the morning? Could that be taking their shoes off when they return from work? Could that be giving them a back rub? Or, there's a lot of things that you could do. Find something that's meaningful to you and your head of household, that works in your relationship, that works in your situation, that is an actionable step that you can take that just shows that you're thinking about them and that you are choosing to submit to them in that moment. I know that it makes Coda feel very, very valued in that moment to know that I am choosing to go out of my way to do an action for him, to serve him as an act of submission. And I think that act of service can really be, it can speak volumes to our heads of households that in a lot of ways, sometimes they feel overlooked in that way. And so it's definitely something to consider. Like I said, this isn't going to be for everybody, especially this one. It's not going to be for everybody, but it's something to consider and try. See if it's something that your head of household really values. It could be, it could not be. Of course, you have to look at the 5 love languages. You have to look at what is your head of household really going to value, because acts of service is a love language. But if that's not something that they value as a way to receive love, this tip might fall flat. So take it with a grain of salt, like anything else. The last way to develop a deeper sense of submission, and this definitely won't be for everyone, but just hear me out, is make yourself sexually available to your head of household. I know that this is a touchy subject, and it's something that you definitely need to consider if it's something that works within your relationship. But I think that it is such an act of submission and an act of service and caring for our head of household when we prioritize their sexual needs. Of course, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have your sexual needs prioritized too, but when we're talking about how to develop our sense of submission, to keep their needs at a forefront and make ourselves available to meet those needs, that puts us in a very submissive place. And so it's definitely something to really consider. Of course, like I said, this tip probably will fall flat for some of you. I'm not saying that everyone has to do this, but really consider how much your relationship might benefit from just making your head of household know that you are willing to be available for them in that way. I think they will really value it, and I think that it'll deepen your submission to know that you're willing to submit to their desire and fulfill their needs in that way. So anyway, I hope that those tips kind of gave you a little bit of framework to start with. And like I said, this is just touching the surface of how to develop deeper submission. It is a huge topic that I could go further into. Let me know down below. Would you like me to do a full-length podcast on how to develop deeper submission as a taken in hand? And let me know your thoughts on that. Let me know if you want to see that as a full-length podcast. And again, leave any questions you have down there as well. And we will talk to you guys next time.